So the tier 3. So our tier 3 students are students that need a lot of, as we talked about, that 3 to 5%, and they need a lot of individualized support. So these are the students that we see frequently, and we've oftentimes tried a lot of different things, so they'll need continual support. Typically, when we serve these students, we want to provide some type of assessment, and I'm not talking about a special ed assessment per se, but just some type of, like, how are they doing? What are their grades like? Looking at the whole child, what is their home life like? And finding out what intervention we might choose. For the purpose of today, we're going to talk a little bit about the function-based interventions, but we also have like individual counseling, like I talked about earlier, and we also have other types of interventions that might not be function-based. Tier 3 is for students who they've basically gone through the tier 1 and the tier 2 type of interventions, and they haven't responded. So for those tier 3 students, we need to look, like I said, at the whole child. And typically it takes like a team of people. So we want to get like our behavior specialist, maybe our school psychologist involved, or maybe our special ed staff, or someone, our intervention specialist that knows a little bit about behavior. And then also look at the context. So like someone mentioned earlier, are they just getting in trouble in math class, or maybe just at the beginning of the day, or maybe it's all with male teachers. So looking at the whole, all the pieces of the puzzle, and then based on that, creating some type of what we call functional based assessment. So we look at what's the function of their behavior. What is their behavior communicating to us or telling us? Is it telling us they want more attention, or maybe they want to escape something? So function-based support is basically, it comes from our behaviorists, like applied behavior analysis, and it looks at the whole environment, and it really emphasizes a purpose, like I already said, that the behavior is communicating something to us, and then we look at ways to kind of support and train the student so that they can have their needs met through that communication. And so basically when we see a problem behavior, it can either speak to us that the student wants to get or obtain something, or escape or avoid something. So, you know, a student maybe, like I said, yells out a profanity. So oftentimes they might be trying to get attention, correct? Or get either adult attention or peer attention. A student maybe rips up a piece of paper, so they might be trying to escape maybe a test or a writing prompt or something. So we look at the problem behavior. Are they trying to get something out of it? Are they trying to avoid something? And are they trying to get something social, like a friend, you know, for friends? Or you know, are they trying to escape an activity? And then is it adult or peer? So this is kind of some basics on function of behavior. And this also helps us when we think about this, when we fill out our office discipline referral and look at those perceived motivations. It's all basically the same stuff. So it's just training all of us to look at students that when they behave a certain way, what are they really trying to tell us? So some of the parts of those, what we call functional behavior assessments, have to do with, you might have someone on your site coming to you, asking to interview you, asking you more in-depth information about the problem behavior so that they can find out, like, where is it happening, when is it most likely to occur, coming up with a hypothesis statement, and then creating those specific plan to teach and support the student. So 4 of the key things to these tier 3 interventions are that it's an instructional approach. So we want to teach kids, they're deficient in some type of area for a reason, and we want to teach them how we want them to behave. We want to learn how to intervene early in that escalation cycle. And then also we want to provide them respect, because we know that oftentimes they might come from, and you'll hear more about like trauma. A lot of kids of our students in our district are exposed to lots of trauma. So how can we try to be respectful and find alternative ways on dealing with students? I think those are the key pieces that we need to think about when we think about our tier 3 students. So I want to show you one, maybe we'll just do a little bit of review, and then I want to show you one more video about that we put together. Actually, we're going to show it, you might see it again at some of our other sites about PBIS, and it kind of just wraps up everything that and then I want to share with you guys, to wrap it up, a video that we just put together, and like I said, you might see it again, but it's just a good way to summarize what we've talked about.
PBIS provides multi-tiered systems of support for schools
that organizes evidence-based practices into an integrated continuum,
and that enhances academic, behavioral, and social-emotional outcomes for all students.
We want every student and staff member on our campuses to feel safe, respected, and to develop the positive relationships necessary to foster a sense of community, ownership, and belonging.
Here are 10 research-based outcomes we see when schools implement school-wide PBIS. The first is a reduction in problem behavior. The second is an increased academic performance for all students. The third is increased attendance. The fourth is improved social-emotional competence among all students. The fifth is an improved perception of safety. The sixth is a reduction in bullying behaviors. The seventh is improved organizational efficiency. The eighth is a reduction in staff turnover. The ninth is an increased perception of teacher efficacy. The 10th is improved relationships between students, staff, administrators, parents, and all stakeholders.
To achieve these outcomes, we implement the tiered PBIS framework, which is data-driven and organized in teams.
PBIS teams are comprised of a variety of members, including a data analyst, a tier lead, and an administrator, but they can also include teachers, parents, and students. Teams meet regularly to identify areas for improvement using data generated from a variety of sources, including referral forms, surveys, and staff recommendations. Teams then develop action plans that include next steps and SMART goals, goals that are specific, measurable, agreed upon, realistic, and time-based. PBIS and its teams are divided into 3 tiers. The first tier includes all students on a campus. Successful Tier 1 implementation includes establishing 3 to 5 expectations for student behavior, and then explicitly teaching those behavior expectations across multiple environments. It also means developing an acknowledgement and reward system for when students get it right, and clearly defining consequences to reduce ambiguity. Tier 1 of PBIS is the things that we do on campus for all students and includes strategies and initiatives like CM and GRR, technology access, social and emotional curriculum, and counseling guaranteed services, and more. Each site will develop a Tier 1 program that fits the needs of their students and staff.
Help students feel positively connected to the schools,
Creating safe learning environments.
and keep students in the classroom learning.
So what happens if a student needs more? That's where Tier 2 comes along. Tier 2 is targeted interventions for students. So how are Tier 2 students identified? First, teams look at school-wide data, things like discipline referral forms, attendance, and grades, and then they use parent and staff recommendations. After identification, teams determine the right intervention for each student. There are many Tier 2 interventions that staff can use. Some common ones are check-in and check-out, social-emotional groups, behavioral contracts, and academic interventions, both during the school day and after school. Tier 2 teams then monitor intervention data to determine the effectiveness of interventions and see if any adjustments need to be made. If Tier 2 supports are unsuccessful, a student is then given individualized interventions in Tier 3. Many sites are just beginning their implementation of Tier 3, so here are some tools that sites can use in order to have an effective Tier 3 implementation. The first thing students need is an SST. SSTs are a bridge from Tier 2 to Tier 3 and are used to help determine the appropriate supports. SST stands for Student Support Team and is a team comprised of a variety of individuals that meet to develop an individualized plan for each student in need. Teams can choose supports like functional behavior assessments, person-centered planning, the usage of community partners, and more. It's important to remember that SSTs are not an intervention. They are simply a tool to help determine the appropriate interventions for each student. SSTs need to be done to fidelity in order to have an effective Tier 3. And this includes collecting and analyzing data, following through with the interventions, and meeting regularly to make adjustments as necessary. Improving students' relationships with teachers has important, positive, and long-lasting implications for both students' academic and social development. However, solely improving students' relationship with their teachers will not produce gains in achievement. But those students who do have close, positive, and supportive relationships with their teachers will attain higher levels of achievement than those students with more conflict in their relationships. One way to foster more positive interactions between staff and students is to use the 4-to-1 model. In this model, you have 4 positive interactions for every 1 behavioral correction. This moves staff away from more punitive responses to student behavior. Research shows that punitive responses are ineffective at best and harmful at worst. The focus for 4-to-1 is more on modeling and explicitly teaching the behaviors we want to see so students know what is expected of them. This helps build relationships and mentorships and improves behavioral outcomes. You can help us create safe, respectful, and positive campuses by actively participating in your site's PBIS program. Use 4-to-1 feedback with your students in the classroom. Hand out acknowledgments when students do the right thing. Nominate students for site awards. Refer struggling students to Tier 2 intervention programs. Support school-wide interventions on campus. And work within your PLC team to share best practices and evaluate student learning.